So this is Ragini Bharadwaj and I'll be your host for today's webinar on React JS hooks, facilitated by Pranathi Software Services Private Limited. Please allow me to quickly give a high-level glimpse of our company. With over 20 years of experience, Pranathi Software Services is a dynamic and fast-moving firm providing IT support services, application development, and integration services in Hyderabad, India. Today, I'm delighted to introduce the presenter, Mr. Sumit Shah, tech entrepreneur who co-founded Analyzen in 2008, the first ever and the biggest digital agency of Bangladesh. So, before we begin, meanwhile, let me get started. Let me get set the context for today's webinar. You can ask any questions at any time in the Q&A section. We shall take up your questions at the end of the webinar. And in case your questions are not answered, you can reach to our email ID. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Mr. Sumit Shah.
Thank you. So I would like to share my screen first, but first of all, as I said, that I was contacted by Pranathi Software Services Limited almost 1 month ago. So without further delay, I'm sharing my screen. So hi everyone, hope you are doing great. First of all, thank you very much for managing some time from your busy schedule to attend this webinar. I would also like to say my sincere thanks and gratitude to Pranathi Software Services Limited for inviting me to this webinar. Today we are going to talk about React tools. But before that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Sumit Shah. My first identity is I'm a full stack web developer and a programming enthusiast. I love to learn and share what I learn. Professionally, I'm an entrepreneur and I founded my country's first ever and one of the largest digital marketing agency, Analyzen, back in 2008 when I, when I was a third year graduating student. Later, I founded my own learning platform called Learn with Shumit, where I share my programming knowledge and experiences. I have a YouTube channel called Learn with Shumit, where I share programming related tutorials in native Bengali language. If you want to visit the channel, you can go to this link, youtube.com/learn with Shumit. I have more than 32,000 plus subscribers there, and 50,000 plus learners are directly or indirectly receiving support from this platform. Enough about my introduction. Now let's jump into today's topic. So today we are going to talk about React hooks. But before that, I would like to say that in today's session, I will assume that you already know the fundamentals of React framework and have sound knowledge on JavaScript fundamentals. It's obvious because React hook is an advanced concept of React.js, right? Anyways, so first of all, what is React hook? So React hooks use superpowers of the React framework, a very popular framework, we know that, calling special hook functions from within a component. We can call React hook functions inside a component anytime. And we can build static or dumb presentational components in React by writing simple JavaScript functions and hook into the component like this. And UI components are often dynamic. They may need to change the state of their data, react to lifecycle events, access elements from the DOM, and many other things. But prior to React version 16.8, we developers were required to write JavaScript classes to take advantage of certain React features. You can still use classes in React, but hooks generally provide a more easier way to build components because you can reuse stateful logic. Without changing your component hierarchy, you can actually use hooks to thing that we did previously in place of classes. React has 10 built-in hooks. I shall take you through almost all of them by the end of this today's session. In addition, you will understand how to write your own hooks from scratch to extract your component logic into reusable functions. If you are new to React, it's helpful to understand why React hooks exist in the first place. In the past, stateful logic that changes within the application was tightly coupled to a class-based component. This means in order to work with reactive data, we needed to create a class first and a class-based component first, and then we need to use the state and other things like this keyword and lots of complexity. That seems reasonable, but in reality, it was a complex tree of nested components at the end, like this. So it looks like a hell, right? And this is where I have to admit that many people dislike React because of this type of patterns. Sharing any logic required some frustrating patterns like higher order components, render drop, etc. They are actually patterns which require you to pass components as arguments to another component, which seems more complex to many people, including me. Fortunately, hooks changed everything by giving you access to some lower level primitive features of React outside the context of a component. It simply removed the reactivity from the components, and that was the fundamental concept. Just it separated the reactivity from the components. When you work with hooks, you can simply think of them like low-level primitives of the React framework. Like we know that string is a primitive thing, number is a primitive thing in JavaScript, and we can think hook as this kind of low-level primitives of the React framework that give you special abilities that you would not otherwise have in vanilla JavaScript. The hooks themselves are functions which always start with the name use. This is the first rule because you are using the superpower of React framework. Now, before you start using React hooks, there is just one rule you should be aware of, and that is to only call them at the top level of a functional React component. They don't work inside regular JavaScript functions, nested functions, loops, or anything like that. The only exception to this rule is when building your own custom hooks, which we will look at towards the end of this session. Now, let's check each built-in React hook one by one. Let's break them down one by one, starting with the most used use state hook. And use state is the most important and often used hook. To import it in your React app, simply import it from the React package. The purpose of use state is to handle reactive data, as simple as that. Any data that changes in the application is called state, and when state changes, you want React to update the UI so that the latest changes are reflected to the end user. And this hook takes one optional argument, which is the default state, which we will go ahead and set to 0 in this case. It returns an array or tuple that returns two values that you can use within your component. The first value is the reactive data or state, and if we then reference it in the UI and it changes in the future, React will automatically rebuild or re-render the UI, or in fact react to the UI to show the latest value. It will start with a value of 0, but if we want to change it in the future, what should we do? And that's where the second element in the array comes into rescue. It is a setter function actually, and for example, we might listen to the onClick event on this button, and when clicked, we call the setCount function to increment the count by 1. If we can put this into a class-based component, you can already see it's far more complex. We need a class to extend the React component, a constructor to initialize the state, and also notice that how we are required to use this keyword all over the place. And use state, in my opinion, is much cleaner solution. Now we are ready to tackle the second most important hook, use effect, which also happens to be one of the most confusing. And in order to understand it, you first need to understand the component lifecycle of React. In our old class-based components, we implement methods to handle different lifecycle events. And the component and the lifecycle events are these. Right, the main three lifecycle events: component did mount, component did update, and component did did mount, did update. Sorry, I have a spelling mistake here in the presentation. The last one should be component did mount, did update, and component did unmount. So that should be unmount. And the first one, component did mount. In this case, the component is added to the UI or mounted, and then we get the callback, which we can and this event can only happen once. And then reactive data on the component can change or update it anytime, which can happen multiple times. And at certain time, the component can be removed from the UI or unmounted, that we would say. Now, keep these lifecycle events or side effects. We can call these lifecycle events the functions inside the lifecycle events. Anything other than React out of React scope, like fetching data from the API or requesting the database, these kind of things called side effects. So we talk about the use when we talk about the use effect hook, we actually talk about the side effects actually. So it allows us to implement logic for all of them from within a single function API. That's it. So use effect is a single function that takes a function you define as its first argument. This is the first thing, that you will pass a simple function to use effect as parameter. React will then run this function or side effect, anything you can say, after it has updated the DOM. With the current implementation, as you see in the example, it will run this function anytime stateful data changes on the component. That means it will run once when the component is initialized with the default value, then run again when the state or count is changed or updated. But in most cases, though, you will likely want more fine-grained control over that behavior. For example, imagine we need to fetch data from an API when the component is first initialized, then update the state asynchronously after the data has been fetched. This would result in an infinite loop, as you can see, because every time we do the fetch, we then update the state, which then triggers another fetch, and so on forever. It will never finish. The way we address this issue is by adding a second argument to the use effect, which is an array of dependencies. If you add an empty array, it means there are no dependencies, which means it would run only once when the component is first initialized. But in other cases, you might want to rerun the function anytime the certain stateful data has changed. You can do that by adding the state to the dependencies array. So in this case, count. Now React will track that value, and anytime it changes, it will rerun this function. Now, one last thing you might want to do with use effect is run some code when the component is destroyed, which means some cleaning jobs need to be performed. The way we implement this is to return a function from our use effect callback. Return will take this function, React will take this function return here and will call it when the component is destroyed. Make sense? Okay, so now let's move on to our next hook, use context. So this hook allows you to work with React Context API, which is simply a mechanism that allows you to share data throughout the entire component tree. Without passing props though, we don't need to pass props into each component tree. And Context API actually, in summary, shares data without passing props. Let's imagine we have an object called theme that can be light or dark. To share the current theme across multiple disconnected components, we can create a context. One part of the application might use a light theme, so we use a context provider to scope the light theme here. Now, any child component inside of it can inherit that value without needing to pass props down to the children. And that finally brings us to the use context hook, which allows us to access or consume that value from the context provider, which might live many levels higher up in the component tree. Okay, so that's it. Now, if the theme changes from light to dark in the parent provider, the value will be updated here automatically. Now, if you have ever used React Context in the past, you have likely used the consumer component. The use context hook is basically a cleaner replacement for that consumer. Now, let's see what useRef hook is. This hook allows you to create a mutable object that will keep the same reference between re-renders. It can be used when you have value that changes, kind of like you set state. It actually same as set state, but the difference being that set state triggers a re-render, but useRef will not re-render the UI. That's the only difference. For example, if we try to build a counter button with useRef, we can reference the current count by calling count.current. However, if we click the button, the count would never change the UI because useRef will never trigger a re-render like setState does. So that can be useful when we need a mutable value. But a more common use case for useRef is to grab HTML elements from the DOM. We can start by creating a null reference called myButton, then connect it to the raw HTML button using a ref attribute. From there, we can reference the HTML button and a function to call native DOM APIs. Like click in this example. which will programmatically actually click the button. The bottom line is when we need to grab an element from the DOM, useRef is the hook that you are looking for. The next hook we will look at is a pretty scary one, the useReducer hook. But what it does is actually very similar to setState. It just goes about it in a different way using the redux pattern, which works like this. Instead of updating the state directly, you dispatch actions. That goes to a reducer function, and the reducer function determines how to compute the next state. Now, just like useState, useReducer returns an array of two values, with the first value being the reactive state that you want to show in the UI, same like useState. The second value is where things get different. Instead of a function that updates the state, you are given a function that can dispatch an action. An action is a simple JavaScript object that has a type property, which can be any string you want, and an optional data payload. Data payload can be given or can be omitted. You might dispatch an action when a button is clicked, which will ultimately trigger your reducer function. The reducer function is something you define and pass as the argument to the useReducer hook. The function takes the current state and the action as arguments and uses these two values to compute the next state, which is usually handled inside a switch statement. In this example, if the action is increment, we just increment the state, and when decrement, we just decrement the state. And lastly, useReducer can take the initial state as the second argument. That's it. It's all about useReducer. Now, you might be wondering why would you ever want to use code like this? Because this looks way more complex than using use state hook, right? The answer is, which not everyone will agree with, is that it helps your code manage complexity as it grows. As you can already see, our reducer function is equipped with all the business logic, and any developer in your absence can get a clear understanding of the business logic just by looking at this reducer function. So it's compiled in a single place. So your business logic is separated. That's it. As you add more components to your app, it becomes more difficult to manage state in a reliable and predictable way with use state, because you might have lots of set state calls everywhere in a scattered way, and the redux pattern can help you in this case. Hope I made it clear to you. Now,
Sir, I have a question about React hooks.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, in the use state, here has some like state management stores data. So I am thinking about this about 1 month, like how to works React hooks. And you already made some useful video about React, and I already expect from you that you will make sure about those type of videos, that how React hooks work exactly, how to the inner code structure or architect has been made. Just I want to know the built-in uh, functionality about React.
Okay, so this is a 1 hour session, so it's actually not possible to implement the React hook step by step in this in a single webinar, because as you have already watched my tutorial, I explained one single hook, and it took me 1 hour to complete a single hook. But today I have only 40 minutes to 1 hour time, so I actually this webinar is for those who already work with React in class-based components, or want to jump into React hooks. But as you already have React hooks knowledge, the implementation that you are asking for, I would recommend you to kindly look at my context API tutorial in Learn with Sumit YouTube channel, where you will find I implemented use state hook myself, where I also implemented my own context and context provider and consumer. That video will give you a clear understanding that how each hook is implemented in React, because I made my own context API. I made my own use state hook. So is that necessary to go into each and every hook and implement that myself? Because people does not like that, because these are simple vanilla JavaScript functions that are actually uh, uh, calling behind, React is calling them behind the scene and calling some complex features and doing some complex things in a very simple way. Because previously we had to use class, that was also simple, but functional use cases are more simpler, as we can see. Its structure looks more easier. So that's why they have implemented. I, in my Learn with Sumit YouTube channel, I would take your question and I would try to implement those hooks individually if I have time. Thank you for your question.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. And I have a request to you, that is, if you give some useful video like how to make a React framework, or like if you make a framework like React, and if you
Great, great. Thank you, thank you.
teach us about
Thanks
this,
for this
then it will
request.
be very helpful.
Because I make, as you know, I make videos for the larger community. So I have to make sure that the community is ready for taking or consuming this kind of tutorials. Because if my video is very informative, but only 10 people watch and understand this, that would not create an impact. So I am trying to create a community who understands JavaScript very well, because we have very poor knowledge in JavaScript. Our community is not yet ready to actually jump into React. I believe so. So because when I get any questions from from the community, when I receive this kind of questions like a simple function implementation, they can't understand. So then I can understand did not complete the JavaScript basics. So I want to go step by step. So I think I made it clear to you. So, but I have plans to do those kinds of advanced tutorials in the future. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me continue the presentation again. So as we were in the use memo hook, uh, use memo hook can help you optimize computation cost for improved performance. So this is not a mandatory hook. This is actually a performance optimization hook. But keep in mind, you don't want to prematurely optimize performance, because that's very, very harmful for your application. And I call it performance obsession. So think of this hook as an opt-in tool to deal with the expensive computation that you know is hurting performance. So if you feel that this function call or this part of the component is hurting the application very much, then actually optimize it. Don't just jump and go into going and pass time in optimizing all your functional components. So now I'm telling you the use hook, how to use the use memo hook. Let's imagine we have a counter again, but then we compute an additional property after that called expensive count that requires some kind of expensive computation. Instead of recomputing on every render, we can just memoize the value. We write a function that returns the computed value and pass it to use memo hook. That's it. So React will remember that. That's good for memoizing return values. But in other cases, you may want to memorize an entire function. In that case, you are looking for the use callback hook. When you define a function in a component, a new function object is created each time that component is re-rendered. Usually, this is not a big deal for performance, but in some cases, if your function is computational heavy, you may want to memorize the function. A common use case is when you pass the same function down to multiple child components. Like in this case, you can see already a map, array.map. So it actually loops through all the elements. And if we use the function there, so it will actually recompute the function again and again. If there are 1000 button elements, so that will be computed 1000 times. So it would be computational heavy. So in that case, use memo can be a very good use case. Now, wrapping the function in use callback, it prevents unnecessary re-renders of the children, because they will always use the same function object. As we know that in JavaScript, function is a reference type. So in this case, React will actually memorize or cache this function. So the memo, so every time the component is re-rendered, React will actually supply this memoized version of the function. It can only change the dependency count is changed. So we can pass a dependency like we passed into use effect. So there is a similarity of the structure or syntax with use effect. So I think I made it clear. So now we will see the custom, how we can make our own custom React hook. So I will describe it very simply. So far,
Brother, sorry to disturb.
yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear
The
you.
someone has drawn on the screen something. We have problem
So I think
seeing.
yeah, some users are actually pointing the screen to understand. So I would request you. It might distract some other participants. So kindly, please don't do this. And I can't actually see the drawing. It's peculiar. I don't know. I have never seen these kind of things in Zoom. Anyways, so okay. So far we have seen most of the React built-in hooks. Now we are going to make our own custom React hook so that we can reuse them in React components, just like we saw in case of built-in hooks. We have used so many built-in hooks so far. Now we will make our own custom hook and implement that. So notice how a component is using two hooks together. Okay, use step to define a blog post title and then use effect to fetch the title from the database. Now let's imagine we have 10 other React components where we need to implement the same functionality. Will you copy the code again and again? It's not Redux. We can't just take this boilerplate and copy paste everything. The great thing about hooks is that we can easily do that by simply copying the reusable code to another simple function whose name starts with use. That's it. That would be a React hook. Use title in this case. I named it use title here. You can name it anything, but you must start the function name with use. It's just a regular JavaScript function that implements the same code we had in our app component. The only difference is that we can now simply return the title from this function so that we can use it elsewhere in the application. That's it. We can now simply use it inside the app component and it will work just fine. So it helped us in making reusable hooks that we can just call in different components. So if my application has several parts which needs to be repeated again and again, we can just make our custom hooks for that and reuse them easily. So React is a component architecture based framework, as we know. So hooks actually provide a more cleaner and beautiful solution to uh, 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 make the code look good and look reusable, and we can implement hooks very easily. As you can see, if you have vanilla JavaScript knowledge and you know JavaScript functions, objects, and these basics very well, then React hooks is just a piece of cake. So that's it. And with that, we looked almost every single built-in React hook and our custom hook also. I hope this session helped you a lot. It was a pleasure explaining modern React features with you guys. Hope you liked it. And thank you. So I'm done with my presentation. So now I'm open to questions.
Yeah, I hope everybody might have enjoyed the session as we enjoyed delivering it. So if you
Thank
have
you.
any questions, please comment in the Q&A section, or you can ask directly with Mr. Sumit.
Okay, sir. I have a question about Redux and React Context API. That is, we can easily use Redux functionality by React Context hook, and here has also useReducer hook. So in the big application, can we use without Redux just React like two hooks about context API and another is useReducer hook?
Thank you for the question, and it's a very common question everywhere. So let me explain this way. Like Redux is actually focused on state management. So and this state management, it is not related to React. So Redux can be used with Vue.js, Redux can be used with AngularJS, and Redux can be used, in fact, in Vanilla.js for state management. So it's a different library, just like jQuery. jQuery is a separate library, right? So we use it, we just pull it and use it. So I would say that Redux was there when context API or hooks were not available. So Redux got very popular, and a lot of companies use Redux in their code base, just like class-based components. So a lot of companies' old code base is based on class-based component. So the problem is JavaScript is a very vast ecosystem, right? So we have lots of options to implement different things in a different style. So that's why I would say the answer would be to your question is that it's actually up to you. Whether Redux seems easier to you, then you can use Redux. But if you understand React.js very well and understand React hooks and context API very well, and also you understand all the patterns of React, like there are some conceptual patterns in React, like lifting state up, then render props pattern, HOC pattern. Those are actually really beautiful. If you deep dive into them, those are beautiful. And if you use them properly, I can assure you, you will never need Redux in React. But yes, in bigger applications, I'm not sure how big that is, but in bigger applications, there are some senior developers who believe that Redux can help you on that, because what I think is they're actually they have a team, right? So then when a single developer is managing a React component, I personally believe Redux is never necessary. But when multiple people are working together, and some people know Redux, some know context API, some know hook. So if the knowledge is scattered, then I think a single state management library should be forced. That's why Redux comes into play in bigger applications, in enterprise solutions. But React query and other things, React is also trying to replace Redux. In fact, Redux team is also working closely with React team. If you see in their website, they work closely with the React team, and I have heard from some developers that actually Redux team helped React team to develop React hooks and other things, and context API. So that's actually, it's up to you. If you want to use Redux, you can use that. But if your application is mid-sized or and big size, I would say you can implement it without Redux. Absolutely, no problem with that. So I explained it in detail so that you get all your answers, the future answers too.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Can you hear me,
I can
sir?
hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you, sir, and congratulations for your next presentation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
I am. So I heard very carefully your speech, your presentation. What I learned from the very beginning and till now, I forced myself to learn the JavaScript first.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
absolutely.
actually, sir, I am newbie in this field. No, I am learning. I'm just forced myself to learn more and more, and I'm following your videos very enthusiastically, especially in YouTube. I love very much your presentation, and that
Okay,
is very.
do you speak Bangla?
Yes, we can speak also Bangla. I can speak Bangla.
Oh, great, great. So you will understand my videos. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now, I noticed you announces for upcoming JavaScript for beginners.
Yeah.
Sir, then I think the follower, I mean, just follower will get the grab item from you. So, what your suggestion from the newbies like me that should how to start the just from where?
Okay. So thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate you that you are actually you want to dive into JavaScript. That is a very fundamental thing that you should understand at first, because what people do is just jump into React and they forget about JavaScript. But
Yes,
React is nothing other than JavaScript. So React is just a piece of cake, as I said, if you know JavaScript, because there is, if you open the React code base, it's an open source. So you will find those are simply vanilla JavaScript. And if you understand JavaScript, you will understand the React code base too. So as you said, the beginner series, I always recommended W3 schools, because personally,
yes,
I
sir.
learned everything from W3 schools. I learned PHP from W3 schools. I learned JavaScript from W3 schools. And I have never seen a better tutorial anywhere else in the world. and that is the most simple English language that can be written. So I believe W3 Schools is beautiful, and my JavaScript playlist will be live from tonight, I guess. I accidentally published that in my YouTube in my Facebook group, but actually I wanted to keep it as sacred, so that at night it was scheduled, but AM and PM made some problem, so that's why that got published. But actually, it will be published at night. So that playlist will be totally based on W3 Schools, because personally I believe I can't make a better tutorial than W3 Schools. So with due respect, I will actually follow that W3 Schools curriculum, and I will explain in my way. So as the explanation is very important, because not everyone can understand what is written in the documentation. So in if you are a beginner, if you are a learner, and if you follow my tutorial, this the upcoming JS series, you will see how to read a documentation properly, how to read line by line and understand everything, and how to practice along with it. So that is very important. So if you want to do something by yourself, self-learning, I want to say, so that would be very beneficial for you. But the problem is the problem in the community is they want very small videos, small videos. So it's actually not possible to explain a concept like programming in very small videos, because people who are making small videos for you as per your requirement, they are actually making entertainment content, not a programming content. So the context is different here. So if I have the passion to make you understand that whether you have understood the content or not, that is important to me. When someone gets back to me and says that they understood my content, I really feel honored. So that is my only goal. But my goal is not to make an entertainment video that just rocks the community. I don't want that. So I want more and more beginners like you, who actually understand the importance of JavaScript or any programming language concept. That is very important. So if you understand the concept, these libraries and frameworks are just are weapons to make your life easier. To code a bit in vanilla JavaScript, you might need to write 10 lines. A framework will help you to write it in 3 lines. That's it. I think I made it clear to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You made me clear. You made my senses.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you, sir. Please go on, and we hopefully you will release your JS beginners series ASAP. I mean, as soon as possible. Thank you, sir, for your responses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you recap useMemo and useRep, please?
You want me to present it again?
Yes, within short time, sir. If you,
I have some time constraints, so I would request you. This would be a recorded. This will be recorded live, and you can watch it in from my YouTube channel too. And I have dedicated. And do you speak Bangla? Sorry, you are
yes,
from
yes.
India, right? You
No.
understand? You understand Bangla?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I would recommend you to go to youtube.com/learnwithshumik and search for my useMemo and useRef hook videos. You will understand it very well, because that is explained in detail there with lots of examples. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, can I speak Bangla here?
Sure, you can. I will translate it for you. No problem.
আমি এখানে বাংলাতে বলতে পারবো কি স্যার?
হ্যাঁ তুমি বলতে পারবো ভাই, বলো। আমি এটাকে ইংলিশ করে দিব, প্রবলেম নেই, তুমি বলো।
জি ভাই, জি স্যার। সরি, আসলে আমি ইংলিশে একটু খুব ভালো বুঝি
প্রবলেম
না।
হ্যাঁ, এটা কোনো সমস্যা না, তুমি তোমার কোশ্চেনটা বলে ফেলো।
জি, রিঅ্যাক্ট আমরা যখন রিঅ্যাক্ট ইনস্টল করি স্যার, তখন আমি অনেক টিউটোরিয়ালে দেখছি কেউ npm ইনস্টল রিঅ্যাক্ট লেখে, আবার কেউ npx লেখে। তো এই দুইটার ভিতরে স্যার পার্থক্য কি যদি একটু বলতেন।
Okay, so he's asking the difference between npm and npx, the way of installing node applications. So
Yes, sir.
I am going to explain it in Bangla first for him, then I will translate it to for others. So তুমি যেটা বললা যে npm এবং npx, so npm হচ্ছে older syntax, মানে তোমার যে কোনো নোড প্রসেস ইয়ে করার জন্য। সো আমরা অলরেডি জানি যে মাইক্রোসফট হ্যাজ অ্যাকুয়ার্ড npm। সো মাইক্রোসফট আসার পর অনেক ধরনের চেঞ্জ আসছে, অনেক কিছু স্মার্ট করার চেষ্টা করছে। সো npm এর মূল সমস্যাটাই ছিল যে npm এর ভার্সন ম্যানেজমেন্টটা, যেহেতু এটা ওপেন সোর্স ছিল, ইট ওয়াজ নট প্রপারলি মেনটেন, হ্যাঁ, খুব ভালোভাবে মেনটেন করা হতো না। যার কারণে দেখতা যে এর আগে পুরোনো পুরো নোড অ্যাপ্লিকেশন ইনস্টল করতে গিয়ে ভার্সন কনফ্লিক্ট, প্রচুর পরিমাণে এরর, হ্যাঁ, ওয়ার্নিং ভরা থাকতো। যার কারণে আমিও আমার সিরিজে বলতাম যে ইয়ার্ন ইউজ করতে। বাট এখন কিন্তু তোমরা যদি একটু রিসেন্ট টাইমসে দেখো, npm এর কিন্তু অনেক আপগ্রেড হয়েছে এবং এখন ওই ওয়ার্নিং গুলো কমে আসে, অনেক কম আসে আগের তুলনায়। এখনো আসে বাট অনেক কম আসে। প্লাস এখন ভার্সন গুলো অনেক স্টেবল ভাবে রিলিজ হয়, কারণ এখন একটা প্রফেশনাল টিম, মাইক্রোসফটের মতো একটা টিম, তারা এটাকে মনিটর করছে। সো এনপিএক্স হচ্ছে মানে এনপিএম হচ্ছে কি তোমার পুরো জিনিসটা একটা রিপোজিটরি থেকে তোমার মেশিনে পুল করে টেনে নিয়ে চলে আসে। কিন্তু তুমি যখন এনপিএক্স ইউজ করবা, এনপিএম কিন্তু ভার্সন, তুমি যে ভার্সন বলবা সেই ভার্সনেরটা আনবে, আর যদি ভার্সন না বলো লেটেস্টটা আনবে। আর এনপিএক্স কি করবে, এনপিএক্স অলওয়েজই লেটেস্ট ভার্সন আনবে, ওইটা মেক শিওর করবে। যেমন ধরো তুমি ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ দিয়ে রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ ইনস্টল করবা। সো যখন তুমি এটা করতে চাবা, তখন এর আগে আমরা কি করতাম, ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ আগে ইনস্টল করে নিতাম এনপিএম দিয়ে, রাইট? তারপরে আমরা ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ, তারপর একটা ফোল্ডারের নাম দিয়ে রিয়াক্ট প্রজেক্ট খুলতাম। বাট যখন তুমি এনপিএক্স ইউজ করবা, তখন তোমার মেশিনে ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ ইনস্টল করার প্রয়োজন নেই। তখন যেটা হবে, ধরো তুমি 1 বছর পরে ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ দিয়ে একটা নতুন রিয়াক্ট প্রজেক্ট খুলতে মানে খুলবা। আগের ক্ষেত্রে যেটা হতো, তোমার কিন্তু ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ পুরানো ভার্সন ইনস্টল আছে পিসিতে, সো তোমাকে ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ দিয়ে যখন তুমি কল করতে, ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপের অনেক পুরানো ভার্সন দিয়ে তোমার রিয়াক্ট প্রজেক্ট তৈরি হতো। কিন্তু যদি তুমি অলওয়েজ এনপিএক্স দিয়ে লিখো, তাহলে তোমার মেশিনে ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপের টোটাল রিপোজিটরি ভার্সনটা থাকবে না। সে জাস্ট একটা ইনস্ট্যান্স রাখবে এবং ক্রিয়েট এনপিএক্স ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ যখনই তুমি কল করবে না কেন, আজ থেকে 10 বছর পরেও সে মেক শিওর করবে তোমার মেশিনে যাই থাক না কেন, সে লেটেস্ট ক্রিয়েট রিয়াক্ট অ্যাপ যে প্যাকেজটা, সেটাকে ইউজ করে তোমার জন্য রিয়াক্ট প্রজেক্ট বানাবে। বুঝতে পারছো?
জি স্যার, জি স্যার, থ্যাংক
Okay,
ইউ স্যার।
so let me explain it in English. So what I said is, his question was npm versus npx. What's the difference? So previously we used npm install to install any node package, but in recent times, as we know that Microsoft has acquired npm, so they are actually upgrading things and they are actually managing the whole npm code base. So previously npm was open source and was not properly maintained, so that's why we had to face lots of issues like warning, version conflict, maintainability issues and other things, security concerns, but those things are getting mitigated day by day. So that's why I also recommended 1 year ago that you should use yarn, because that is more well maintained than npm, because that was maintained by Facebook. But right now I believe that yarn is not necessary and npm is smart enough. Currently npm is doing good, and its major update npx, that is really great, because npx makes life a bit easier. Because previously when we install react project or any type of project like create react app, this command, previously we had to install create react app in our machine first, then we need to call create react app to install to set up a react project. But right now we can just call we don't need to install create react app, we can just directly call npx create react app and a folder name. That will make sure that the latest version of create react app package is installed. Because previously when we install create react app first, we in our machine the create react app version might be expired. So after 1 year, if you install a react project with that create react app version, that would actually create an older version. But right now that will never happen. You will also get the latest version by calling npx. That is the difference. So I think I made it clear. Thank you.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
Yeah, ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম।
স্যার আমি বাংলায় বলতে চাইতেছি, ইংরেজিতে বললে হয়তো বা এত ভালো মতো ইয়ে করতে পারবো, এক্সপ্লেইন করতে পারবো না।
বলো বলো বলো।
আচ্ছা, আমি তো আমিন, আমি বাংলাদেশ থেকে বলতেছিলাম আর কি। তো আমার প্রশ্ন হইতেছে যে আমি আপনার ভিডিও তো দেখি, অনেক ভালোভাবে দেখি, আর আপনার ভিডিও দেখে আমি ইনশাল্লাহ ফ্রন্ট এন্ডটা তো শিখছি, ব্যাক এন্ডও শিখছি। এখন নেক্সট ডে শেখার চেষ্টা করতেছি। তো আপনার ভিডিও দেখার পাশাপাশি আমি তো যেটা শিখছি সেটা হইতেছে যে আপনার বোঝানোর ধরনটা তো জানি, আর আপনার ভিডিওগুলো আমাকে অনেক মানে অনেকভাবে ফোর্স করছে যে ডকুমেন্টেশন পড়ার জন্য। এই অভ্যাসটা আমার কাছে এখন বেশ ভালো লাগছে। আর আমি এখন নেক্সট ডে ডকুমেন্টেশন দেখে পড়ার চেষ্টা করতেছি। তো স্যার আমার প্রশ্ন হইতেছে যে সরি স্যার, আমি ভুলে গেছি যে শুভ জন্মদিন। আর
থ্যাংক ইউ।
আর আমার প্রশ্নটা হইতেছে, যদি আমরা এসওসি, হায়ার অর্ডার কম্পোনেন্ট, কনটেক্সট এপিআই বা ইউজ রিডিউসারের মতো যদি হুক জানি রিয়েক্টের ক্ষেত্রে, তাহলে রিডাক্স কতটুকু গুরুত্বপূর্ণ? আমি এখন কিছু কিছু কোম্পানিতে জবের জন্য অ্যাপ্লাই করতেছি,
আমি
বাট
কিন্তু
তারা
একটু আগে এই প্রশ্নটার উত্তর দিয়েছি, এই তুমি মনে হয় ছিলে না লাইভে। আমি কিন্তু একটু আগে
স্যার আমি একটু
আচ্ছা, আমি আসলে
আমি
অনেকক্ষণ ধরে এটা
তো
এক্সপ্লেইন
বাইরে
করেছি, তো আমি আমার রিকোয়েস্ট থাকবে তুমি
স্যার
কাইন্ডলি এটা আমি আপলোড করে দিব আমার চ্যানেলে, ওরা আমাকে শেয়ার করবে, সো কাইন্ডলি তুমি ওটা একটু দেখে নিও ভাই, ঠিক আছে? কারণ এটা আমি একদম এক্সপ্লেইন করছি।
আমার তাহলে
হ্যাঁ।
ও আচ্ছা, তাহলে আচ্ছা আমি চাইতেছিলাম যদি এটা প্রয়োজন হয় তাহলে আমি মানে আমি বুঝতেছি না এর আসলে ডকুমেন্টেশনটা আমি ভালো মতো বুঝতেছি না যে কোথা থেকে শুরু করা উচিত এই বিষয়ে।
রিডাক্সের কথা বলছো?
জি জি, রিডাক্সের।
আচ্ছা, রিডাক্স সম্পর্কে আমি বললাম তো যে আমি আসলে আমার ইচ্ছা আছে রিডাক্স নিয়ে সিরিজ দেওয়ার, হ্যাঁ, বাট সময় করে উঠতে পারছি না। আমার কাছে রিডাক্সের থেকে জাভাস্ক্রিপ্ট শেখানো ইম্পর্টেন্ট বলে মনে হয়েছে, দ্যাটস ওয়াই আমি আগে আগে ভ্যানিলা জাভাস্ক্রিপ্ট দিয়ে শুরু করেছি। তো এটা শেষ হলে বা এটার মিডল কোনো একটা জায়গায় গেলে আমি ডেফিনেটলি রিডাক্স নিয়ে বলবো। আর রিডাক্স হচ্ছে একটা বললাম তো একটা আলাদা স্টেট ম্যানেজমেন্ট লাইব্রেরি। সো তুমি ডকুমেন্টেশন রিডাক্সের কিন্তু ভালোই, একটু ছড়ানো ছিটানো, বাট খারাপ না আর কি। আর তুমি যদি রিডাক্স এর কাজটাই অ্যাচিভ করতে চাও, তুমি রিয়াক্ট কোয়েরি দেখতে পারো, সেটাও আসলে ইনফ্যাক্ট বেশ সিম্পলার আর কি লাগবে আমার, মানে আমার মনে হয় আর কি, সেটাও তুমি ইয়ে করতে পারো। আর এক কথায় যদি তুমি বলো যে রিডাক্স ম্যান্ডেটরি কিনা, আমি বলবো না। তুমি যদি এই যে বাকি যে প্যাটার্ন গুলোর নাম বললাম এগুলো জানলে, হ্যাঁ, তুমি যদি তোমার কম্পোনেন্ট গুলোকে সুন্দর করে, কম্পোনেন্ট ট্রিটাকে সুন্দর করে ভাঙতে পারো এবং সুন্দর করে স্ট্রাকচার করতে পারো, তাহলে 70% কেসই তোমার সলভ হয়ে যাবে উইদাউট এনিথিং। তারপরে বাকি যে 30% কমপ্লেক্সিটি, সেটার মধ্যে 20% তুমি ইউজ কনটেক্সট আর ইউজ হুক দিয়ে অ্যাচিভ করতে পারবা। আর বাকি যে 10% থাকে সেটার জন্য প্রত্যেকটা অ্যাপ্লিকেশনই কমপ্লেক্সিটি হয়, সেটা রিডাক্স দেওয়ার পরেও হয়। এটা হচ্ছে আমার কথা। যারা বলে যে রিডাক্স দিলে কমপ্লেক্সিটি কমে যায়, এটা ঠিক না। কমপ্লেক্সিটি কমে মানে কি, টিমের ক্ষেত্রে কমে। একটা বড় টিম যদি কাজ করে, সেই টিমে যদি 10 জন রিডাক্সের কাজ জানে আর 3 জন হুক নিয়ে কাজ জানে, হুক এবং কনটেক্সট, তাহলে কনফ্লিক্টটা হয়। তখন কোম্পানি এনফোর্স করে যে ঠিক আছে একটা থার্ড পার্টি, আমরা তখন রিয়াক্টের ভেতরেই না যাই, কারণ রিয়াক্ট তো কাপড় একটা জিনিস, পুরো জিনিসটা বুঝতে হয়। আমাদের সমস্যা হচ্ছে কি, আমরা পুরোটা না বুঝে আমরা জাম্প করি আর কি। সো দ্যাটস দ্য প্রবলেম। সো কোম্পানিগুলোকে তো এটাকে হ্যান্ডেল করতে হয়। তো কোম্পানি যেটা করে, ঠিক আছে আমরা ইউনিফর্ম রিডাক্স আলাদা করে ধরে নিচ্ছি এবং রিয়াক্ট শিখে আসতে হবে। সো রিডাক্স প্যাটার্নটা জানলে রিডাক্সটা অন্য ফ্রেমওয়ার্কেও ইউজ করা যায়। লাইক রিডাক্স কিন্তু শুধু রিয়াক্টের সম্পত্তি না, রিডাক্স অ্যাঙ্গুলারও ইউজ করা যায়, ভিউতেও ইউজ করা যায়, রিয়াক্ট সিম্পল ভ্যানিলা জাভাস্ক্রিপ্টও স্টেট ম্যানেজমেন্ট করার জন্য রিডাক্স ইউজ করা যায়, ঠিক আছে? সো দ্যাটস ওয়াই কোম্পানিগুলো ডিসিশন নেয়। কিন্তু আমার কথা হচ্ছে, যদি কোম্পানি চায়, তুমি কেন শিখতে পারবে না? কারণ তোমার যদি জাভাস্ক্রিপ্ট কনসেপ্ট ঠিক থাকে, তাহলে রিডাক্স আসলে কয়েকটা প্যাটার্ন জাস্ট মনে রাখতে হবে রিয়াক্টের মতোই আর কি। সো আমি বলবো তুমি একটু ওয়েট করতে পারো, যদি আমার টিউটোরিয়ালের জন্য ওয়েট করো। আর আদারওয়াইজ ডকুমেন্টেশন একটু কষ্ট করে তো করতেই হবে ভাই, এটা তো আসলে অল্টারনেটিভ নাই।
জি জি, আমি ডকুমেন্টেশনে পড়ার চেষ্টা করতেছি, বাট আমি ফ্লোটা ধরতে পারতেছি না। আমি প্রায় এক সপ্তাহ থেকে আমি বুঝতেছি না যে টুল কিট বলতেছে একবার, এটা বলতেছে এটা বলতেছে, মানে কোথা থেকে শুরু করবো এটা আসলে আমি ধরতে পারতেছি না।
তুমি আগে ভ্যানিলা রিডাক্সেই থাকবা, ভ্যানিলা রিডাক্স এর কনসেপ্টটা বুঝে নিবা নিয়ে। ইনফ্যাক্ট আমি আজকে হুকের মধ্যেও ইউজ রিডিউসারের যে প্যাটার্নটা দেখাইছি, রিডাক্সের প্যাটার্নটা সেম, কি রিডাক্স প্যাটার্ন বলা হয়। এই প্যাটার্নটা রিয়াক্টের মধ্যে এনে দিয়েছে রিডাক্সই, রিডাক্সের টিমই হেল্প করছে রিয়াক্ট এইটাকে ইমপ্লিমেন্ট করতে, ঠিক আছে? সো মানে মিলেমিশেই আছে, কিন্তু কেউ কারো শত্রু না আর কি। তো তুমি আস্তে আস্তে দেখো, ডেফিনেটলি পারবা আর কি। এই হচ্ছে আমার কথা।
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you. So
Sorry.
he was actually asking about the same question that was asked earlier, so I just explained it to him in Bangla. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
So Mr. Sumit sir, just a time check. Like, are you comfortable taking more questions, or shall we?
I am comfortable up to 5:30. Sorry, 5 Indian time.
Yeah.
5 p.m. Indian time.
I think we shall document the questions and share it offline, so that you can help it with.
All the Bengali people out there, if you want to ask questions, you can just go into Learn with Shumit Facebook group and you can ask your questions. We will definitely, the community will answer you. Thank you.
স্যার একটা কোয়েশ্চেন ছিল লাস্ট, সেটা হচ্ছে আপনার আমরা তো ইউজ স্টেট ডিক্লেয়ার করে ওইটাকে গ্লোবাল করার জন্য ইউজ কনটেক্সট ইউজ করি। তো এটা কি পসিবল যে আমরা ইউজ স্টেট ডিক্লেয়ার করার সময় এটা অটোমেটিক গ্লোবাল হয়ে যাবে, তারপর আমরা যে কোনো জায়গা থেকে ইম্পোর্ট করে ওইটা ইউজ করতে পারবো?
ডেফিনেটলি পসিবল যদি তুমি একদম শুরুর দিকে ইউজ স্টেটটা লিখে দাও আর কি, হ্যাঁ, গ্লোবাল কনটেক্সট। বাট আমি তো বললাম যে ইউজ স্টেট কিন্তু গ্লোবাল কনটেক্সটের জন্য পারফেক্ট না, ইউজ রিডিউসার হচ্ছে এই ক্ষেত্রে পারফেক্ট। বাট রিয়াক্ট রিয়াক্ট যখন ইউজ করছো, হ্যাঁ, আমি জাস্ট এভাবে বলি, যখন তুমি রিয়াক্ট ইউজ করছো তখন কিন্তু তুমি আসলে একটা বড় অ্যাপ্লিকেশনকে ছোট ছোট কম্পোনেন্টে ভেঙে নিয়ে আসছো, সেটার জন্যই রিয়াক্ট শিখতে এসছো, সেটার জন্যই রিয়াক্ট পপুলার। কিন্তু তুমি যদি রিয়াক্টের মধ্যে গ্লোবালে চলে যাও, আবার মানে আমার সমস্ত ডেটা একটা জায়গায় আছে, হ্যাঁ, সিঙ্গেল সোর্স অফ ট্রুথ, এবং আমার পুরা অ্যাপ্লিকেশন ওই ডেটার থেকে ডেটা নিয়ে কাজ করে। সো আসলে তখন রিয়াক্টে আসার প্রয়োজন কি? তাহলে এইচটিএমএল, সিএসএস, জেএস, নরমাল ভ্যানিলা জেএস, জেকোয়ারি কি দোষ করেছে আর কি, এটা হচ্ছে আমার কথা। সো হ্যাঁ, বলতে পারো সিঙ্গেল পেজ অ্যাপ্লিকেশন, ভিউ জেএস কি অন্যায় করেছে? তাহলে তো আমরা ভিউ জেএস আসতে পারি, ভিউ জেএসও কম্পোনেন্ট বেসড। সো রিয়াক্টের ফান্ডামেন্টাল কনসেপ্ট হচ্ছে কি, যে আমরা কম্পোনেন্টে ভাগ করে ফেলবো, যেন আমার একটা অ্যাপ্লিকেশনে 10 জন মানুষ ডিফারেন্ট ডিফারেন্ট কম্পোনেন্ট নিয়ে কাজ করতে পারে, হ্যাঁ, সেপারেটলি। সো যখন তুমি একটা গ্লোবাল জায়গায় তুমি সম্পূর্ণ ইউজ রিডিউসার হোক বা ইউজ স্টেট দিয়ে করবা, ইউজ স্টেট তো প্রশ্নই আসে না, কারণ সেই ক্ষেত্রে তুমি সেট স্টেট কল করতে করতে তোমার অ্যাপ্লিকেশনে দুনিয়ার সেট স্টেট ভরা থাকবে। চিন্তা করতে পারতেছো যে পুরো সেট স্টেটে ভরা থাকবে তোমার অ্যাপ্লিকেশন। সো ধরো তুমি কোন একটা কারণে অসুস্থ হয়ে গেলা, আরেকজন তোমার কোড দেখতে আসছে, সে তো মনে করো 100 300 কম্পোনেন্ট আছে তোমার অ্যাপ্লিকেশনে, সেট স্টেট কল খুঁজতে খুঁজতে কে কোনটা কি করে এটা বুঝতেই তো তার দিন শেষ, ঠিক আছে? সো দ্যাটস ওয়াই এই ক্ষেত্রে ইউজ রিডিউসার হেল্প করতে পারে, কারণ তখন সেই ক্ষেত্রে সে শুধু কি করবে, রিডিউসার গুলাতে যেয়ে যেয়ে দেখবে যে রিডিউসার ফাংশনের মধ্যে কি আছে, ঠিক আছে? সো দ্যাটস ইট। কিন্তু ইউজ স্টেট আসলে কখনো গ্লোবাল হিসেবে ইউজ করবা না। আর আরেকটা যেটা তুমি বললা যে করা যায় কিনা, ওই যে বললাম করা তো যাবে ভাইয়া, সবই করা যাবে সঠিক হতে। So just I would like to translate it in English. He asked whether we can use the use state hook as a global state. So I answered, in case of global state, use reducer pattern would be more good approach, because use reducer will make sure all the business logic are separated in the reducer function, so that when the developer is not available, another developer comes into play and he can just check the reducer functions and understand the whole business logic. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
I want to know that where to use state and where to use reducer. Okay, what's better?
Okay, so do you speak Bangla?
হ্যাঁ, বাংলা বলতে পারি।
Okay, so in that case, I would definitely recommend you to watch my Larva instrument video, because that is explained there. There is a separate section there at the end, that differences and other things. But in a nutshell, I just explained that use state is actually the primitive version of state management. Like you have a single component, one component, huh? When you use local state, I think use state is good for local state. But when you are talking about global state, like a state that needs to be shared across all the components in the component hierarchy, in that case, use reducer pattern or redux pattern is good. Actually, redux and use reducer are same pattern. Okay, so the redux team actually helped React team to implement that. So use reducer pattern will make sure that all your business logic is inside the reducer function, so that your business logic is separated in a separate place. So when we call the set state, as you know, when we use state, when we need to change the state, we have to call set state. So if you use state everywhere in the app, there would be almost, and if you have 500 components, and you would have almost 5,000 set state calls. So that would be really very wrong approach. So in that case, I think use reducer is more efficient way. So in a nutshell, you can use reducer as a global state management thing with the help of use context, because use reducer itself can't do that, because as we know, React is a framework where driven by one-way data flow. We already know that it always pass data from top to bottom, parent to child. But Redux to make it both way. But with the help of context API and use reducer hook, we can implement the same thing in React, vanilla React itself. Thank you.
I hope all the questions are answered now. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and special thanks to Mr. Sumit Shah for sharing his valuable insight. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I am also privileged to be here. And thank you, Pranathi Software, again for inviting a Bangladeshi people in your country to talk. Thank you.
It's our pleasure, sir. And in case you have any queries, please reach out to our email ID, that is pranathisoftware2020@gmail.com. Again, the email ID is pranathisoftware2020@gmail.com. So everyone, take care and have a good day. I hope we'll meet in the other webinar soon.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye.